Good morning. Welcome to the First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in Newburyport, Massachusetts, on this glorious first day of spring. I'm Vern Ellis, and I have the privilege to be your worship associate this morning. We come together as a church community, online and in person, committed to love, peace, and justice. Our core values are authentic connection, courageous action, love, spirituality, and wonder. Our mission and our invitation to all of you is to come as you are, journey together in love, act with courage, and transform our world. If you're visiting today or joining us for the first time, welcome. We are glad you're here. If you're joining us online, you will find a link in the order of service in your order of service in your reminder email or just below the live stream window. I call to your attention in the order of service to all the great things that are going on this week. In particular, I highlight C.B. Beale's workshop entitled Preemptive Radical Inclusion. This workshop will be held online Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. You can find information to register in your order of service or on the website, and I hope to see you there. Every Sunday, it's such a blessing that we can gather. So let's give to ourselves welcome once again. It's great to be together.
Indeed, it is so good to be together. It takes all of my sort of self-control to not just be down there talking to you all. It continues to be such a gift to be back together and to be online. This morning, for those of you who are online, and if you haven't seen behind you in person, our doors are open, literally open to the outside to the bricks, and it's just a joyous sight. So happy spring. Thank you for being here and welcome. Our call to worship this morning are the words that were hung over the desk of Reverend John Lowell. Reverend John Lowell was the first minister of this congregation, serving from 1725 until 1767. The meeting house at that time was actually located on what is now known as Market Square. And these were the words that hung above his desk. In Latin, and then I'll translate. They said, "In necessarias unitas, in non necessarias libertas, in utrisic charitas." Translated, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In both, charity. You are faithfully called to worship.
Please join in saying our chalice lighting words as Nash and Joanna light the chalice. The words can be found in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
And each week, we also light 2 candles of peace. These candles represent 2 places on earth that we lift up and remember as sacred encounters with our world. There are untold number of places on earth that need peace. These 2 we hold especially close in this service and through the week ahead. After each candle is lit, I will say, "To this we respond," inviting you to join me together in saying, "Peace, Sul, Shalom," the words for peace in English, Dari, and Hebrew. Our first candle today is lit for Afghanistan and the communities around the world where Afghans have settled, and numerous countries in the Middle East where the 5,000-year-old holiday of Nowruz is being celebrated tonight and tomorrow night. Communities such as the Afghan community right here in Newburyport will be celebrating the arrival of spring and a new year tomorrow night, and they will do so with festivities, gifts, food, and cheer. Nowruz Mubarak, and to this we respond, "Peace, Sul, Shalom." Our second candle today is lit for Florida, Texas, and communities in our country and around our world where trans folks and people who do not conform to the gender binary are having their identities and their safety threatened by dangerous new laws that withhold access to medical care. Let us be a congregation that listens when others tell us that they are suffering. And let us live into our covenant of creating a home where all can dwell together in peace. To this we respond, "Peace, Sul, Shalom." And now it is my pleasure to invite you to rise in body or in spirit so we can join in our opening hymn, number 347, "Gather the Spirit."
Spirit of
It is so incredible to be in here singing with all of you. Thank you. And please join now in our affirmation of faith and our doxology. The words to both can be found in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Good morning. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Joanna Fernandez. My husband, Christian Hansen, and our son, Nash, and I have been attending FRS for 8 years now, ever since we moved to Newburyport from Brooklyn. Back in 2014, prior to our arrival in our new town, there were a few communities that I sought out, ones that I considered most necessary to our properly settling in. The first was a preschool for Nash. He was 4 at the time. Second was a run group for me. Third was a pickup basketball spot for Christian, whose greatest fear in leaving the city was that he'd never find a great game of basketball ever again. He has. And lastly was the closest Unitarian church. Imagine my delight when I discovered it was not only prominently located in downtown Newburyport, but it was a large and thriving community and a beautiful historic venue. Not too shabby for the suburbs. Though the first time Nash ever stepped foot into a church was when he first stepped foot here into FRS, I already knew from Christian and my streaks of attendance at UU churches in New York City, much prior to Nash's arrival on the scene, that Nash's religious education at a UU church was a top priority. Not only did the values and guiding principles of Unitarian Universalism clearly align with our own, but there's really a service in particular that stuck with me. It was a graduation service, and the teenagers in the church, one by one, stood before the congregation and shared their own individual religious beliefs and spiritual paths. These were not children who had been fed a dogma, but children who had clearly been fostered in self-reflection and asking big questions. And here they stood with confidence and the support of their religious community, declaring their own unique truths. I knew I wanted this type of guidance, this spiritual grounding, this gift of community support and acceptance for my child too. And here at FRS, we have found that, and so much more. But instead of speaking to the breadth of my experience here, I'm going to share some of what FRS means to me through the lens of a parent. Some of you may be familiar with the Search Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to positive youth development and the advancement of equity, which has identified 40 developmental assets that help young people grow up healthy, caring, and responsible. I am familiar with these assets because the city of Newburyport has adopted them as a framework to provide a shared language and vision for healthy youth development in our city. While some of these assets are specific to home life and school, for children who attend FRS, so many of these positive developmental building blocks are also fostered and provided for right here by this church community. I don't have time to go through them by one, but I will highlight just a few. This is a community where children find supportive adults and peers, modeling positive, responsible behavior. This is a community that works to be a safe place for all, where children are valued and appreciated and are offered opportunities to help others. This is a community where social competencies, like being comfortable with people of different racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds, are esteemed, and where positive values, like the importance of standing up for one's beliefs and speaking up for equal rights for all people, are not just discussed, but acted upon. This is a community that helps children build positive identity through fostering a sense of purpose in life and helping to build their self-esteem. I could give a whole sermon on the specifics, but again, limited time, so I'm gonna highlight just a few. It is no small thing that Reverend Rebecca bends down to children's eye level to say hello. And then when she looks into their eyes and says, "I am so glad that you are here," her sincerity and love are visceral. It is no small thing that weekly our children are led in ritual, conversation, and action by the grounded, magical, and joy-filled presence that is our amazing Director of Religious Education, Mara. Mara has carried on Julie and Sharon's legacy of joyful community building that is at the heart of our Young Church program, without missing a beat, despite the pandemic. It is no small thing that this year alone in Young Church, our children have openly mourned and celebrated loved ones during the Young Church Day of the Dead service, shared and learned from each other about gender identity, and actively participated in conversations ranging from self-compassion, being friends to ourselves, and doing hard things, to Black Lives Matter, Indigenous people's rights, the war in Ukraine, and what it means to be a refugee. All because they felt safe and respected enough and called upon to do so. And because children are also always encouraged to participate in all of our church's actions and rituals, they have tied ribbons of peace, participated in Indigenous Peoples Day, read aloud in Big Church, and so much more. And finally, it is no small thing that when our family participates in local protests and social justice celebrations, when we look around, the majority of people we know are from church. For our family, FRS is also a way we connect with one another. It is a place of Wednesday night potlucks, hand-painting chalices, and participating in nativity plays. A place where we belt out Christmas songs and not so secretly sway to our favorite hymns. Shout out for Blue Boat Home. And where my husband and I annually get misty-eyed during the singing of the circle game. It is where our dog is blessed with reverence by the minister, and where we sit cuddled in a pew, receiving and sharing friendly waves of greeting before and after services. The front steps of this church are also one of our favorite places to sit and eat ice cream in warmer weather. It feels natural to do so because this church feels like home. And we are proud to sit beneath the many social justice banners that have graced its front. Whether at Young Church with my son or Big Church with my husband, I always leave church feeling closer and more connected to both of them, if even for just a few minutes. Going to church together feels good. It brings out our best selves. All of this and so much more, that is what I have found as a parent at FRS. I will end with a quote from the UUA that speaks to the one goal of UU religious education, but I think also sums up what our church as a whole offers our youth. We seek an outcome of respectful, responsible, life-loving kids who know they are valued for all of who they are and are ready to show others the same deep acceptance. This is our church's legacy to the many lucky children who attend FRS. And this is the legacy our children will carry on with them into the world.
Thank you, Joanna. Wow. And amen to everything she said. Let's just take a moment, actually. For those of us who have raised children in this faith, we know the difference it makes. We know the lives they live and how these values inform who they are. And for those children who are with us this morning and every Sunday, we are so glad you're here. We just, even if you're cranky, as I'm looking at one of them. So join me now in singing the Children to Young Church with hymn number 413, Go Now in Peace.
Good morning. My name is Sue Ellen Tattersall Creed, and I have attended this church for over 64 years. I have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stories to tell that I do not have time to tell you this morning, but would be glad to share later upon request over a beverage of your choice. In the past, I could name everyone who was here on a Sunday morning. But to my delight, the congregation has grown so much that that is now impossible. Happily, it means that the legacy of this place as a standard for right action and as a moral compass in the community is going strong. 3/4 or more of you don't really know who I am, or that my mother was secretary here for 25 years, or that my father's name is on a plaque in the foyer, or that my daughter was part of the first teen choir. But that is not important. What is important is that we were a small family of proud, liberal, religious snowflakes in an avalanche of the ongoing fellowship that has been the driving force here for nearly 300 years. My parents, Roy and Sylvia Tattersall, joined the FRS in 1959. They had heard Bert Steves at a community ecumenical service and were sold. Finally, they had found someone who made theological sense and had a moral compass. From then on, the primary source of social activity for my whole family was here, and our participation has been extensive in committees, groups, and in annual and special events. My family and I remained steadfast when people left this church over the removal of the American and Massachusetts state flags from this pulpit, the adoption of the gray hymnals, 2 stints of interim ministers, and when the Our Father was dropped from the liturgy. Over 64 years, the changes in worship, the polity of the church, the buildings, and ministry have happened after sometimes pretty vehement dissent. Hard to believe, now that all those changes have come to pass, that anyone previously objected to any of it. There was a time when the maintenance of these buildings was overwhelming. There was a time when one parishioner made up the dollar difference when the canvas fell short of the operating budget, but only under the condition that certain topics not be preached from this pulpit. But now, because of the stewardship of this generous congregation, friends of the FRS, and the community at large, we have the means to be responsible caretakers of this historic landmark meeting house, as well as provide ministry and outreach. I look out and I am happy that you all have come to the place I consider my spiritual and religious home. I hope you all come to know what I know, that there is a steady moral compass to be embraced here while having a really good time amidst some heated debate with really smart and generous people. And though your personal legacy, like mine, will likely go individually unrecognized, it will be felt for years to come, because you, my fellow snowflakes, are part of the avalanche of service and giving that is our common legacy.
Wow. Thank you, Sue. The generosity of our community is an essential ministry that supports the work of our church, both in Newburyport and beyond, as Sue said. Each week, 50% of the Sunday offerings, not designated as a pledge, goes to a local community partner engaged in important efforts to help transform our region. Our March shared collection goes to support UTEC, whose mission is to ignite and nurture the ambition of our most disconnected young people to trade violence and poverty for social and economic success. They serve Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill. The program starts behind the walls of correction facilities and transitions into an intensive post-release program in the community. 87% of young adults in their workforce development programming have no new re-arraignments. This re-arraignment rate is a quarter of the state's average. Please help fuel the hope for young people in this program. If you wish to give online, please use the links in your order of service or in the chat. You can also make a contribution via text message. Of course, you can always mail a check to the church as well. The month of March is also a time of our annual campaign. Our time together includes a ritual of giving, and we hope you will participate whether you are here in person or with us online. Perhaps you have brought your pledge cards with you. But if you don't have one, you will find pledge cards in your pews. For those joining us online, a link to submit your pledge online is in the video description. If you would like to make your pledge today, please come forward as the music is playing, and David and I will receive it. Thank you to everyone who has already made their pledge. The offering will now be gratefully accepted.
We are blessed by one another. Each Sunday, we take time to lift up the joys and the sorrows of our beloved faith community. Bettina Turner, our pastoral care associate, will light candles as I read the joys and the sorrows that have been shared with me in advance of today's service. If you would like to share a joy or a sorrow to be read in the service, you can always send an email to betweenus@frsuu.org or directly to myself, and we also have our journal reinstated as you enter into the sanctuary each Sunday. This morning, we light a candle of remembrance for E. Vincent Wyatt, father of Nancy Colby's partner, Peter Wyatt. He died on March 2nd, 2022. He was 92 years old and lived in Greenfield, Massachusetts. A graveside service has been held for him in East Hampton, Long Island, New York, where he grew up. We also light a candle of sorrow with some shocking news from Heather Nestor and Holly Cashman, who ask people to hold in our hearts and prayers their best friends, Jen and JP, as Jen and JP deal with the loss of JP's brother, Jude, who was tragically shot and killed on Thursday. We light a candle of joy and of fellowship for Greg Garnesh, who has come through successful and rather extensive surgery this week. He is still there down in Boston in recovery, hopes to be returning this week, and appreciates knowing that he is remembered. Tom and Ann Himmel ask that we light a candle of joy to celebrate the birth of their new granddaughter, Alexandra, born on March 8th, which they note was International Women's Day. This joy is shared by the new parents, Liz and Whitney Himmel, who are home and doing much better after a long week, as well as by the new aunt and uncle, Aaron and Chris Himmel, and the new cousins, Fee, Maggie, and Charlie Himmel. Tom also asks in the Circle of Life that we light a candle of remembrance for his 96-year-old stepmother, who passed away unexpectedly on March 9th, the day after Alexandra's birth. Jackie Himmel's 5 beloved grandchildren include Chris and Whitney, daughters-in-law Aaron and Liz, and her much-loved great-grandchildren, including Fee, Charlie, and Maggie, and Alexandra. She lived a rich and very full life on her own right up to the end. The adjective Tom says that was most often applied to her was feisty, and a blessing was that she did get to hear of the birth of her 6th great-grandchild, a birth she said she wanted to stick around for. We light a candle of solidarity this morning, as we've often done with our candles of peace over these last weeks, for Ukraine. And I offer this flag, actually, which was given by a member of our larger community who emailed me yesterday and said, I have a flag, and I wonder if your church would hang it. So thank you to that gift. And Michael Fosberg asks that we light a candle of joy, and I'm going to quote his words. He wrote to me that the Amesbury girls basketball team won the school's first Division IV state basketball championship by clobbering Millbury 57-31 yesterday. And at the end of that email this morning, he said, okay, ? And I said, got it. We light one final candle, as we do each week, for all the sorrows and all the joys that, although unnamed, are just as important and held in our hearts. And I invite you now into a spirit of meditation, centering, and prayer as it speaks to you. One of my great teachers, and for many of us, Thich Nhat Hanh, used to write about and speak about a practice that they followed called beginning anew. They would do this each day and each week there in their village, and feels particularly appropriate this day at the start of spring. Dearly beloved, my friends, new guests, people who have been here all of your lives, people who are raising your children, each and every one of us comes to be reminded of who we are at our best. And yet each and every one of us also, too, is human. We fail, we fall, we flounder, we forget, and we remember. May this short ritual of prayer and meditation offer you a chance for self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others as we practice beginning anew. As we stand here, as we sit here, as we reside here together on this first spring day, I invite you to bring into your heart or mind or both something and somewhere where you have fallen short. This may be a long-standing thing, a habit you've yet to be able to release, a relationship you've yet to be willing to restore. Could be something small or large, something that happened just 5 minutes prior to church. It's there. Recognize and realize, my friends, that each and every person online and in these pews holds too something they have fallen short with. We are all so much more than our mistakes and our flaws, and they're real. They are there. I invite you now to take that which has come to your mind and heart and place it on the ground, on the earth. Imagine the earth receiving your burden. And lo and behold, there is a blade of grass that comes in its place. So too, may we lay our burdens down. May we forgive and be forgiven as each day we begin anew. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Lark Madden, and this is my wife, Annie Madden. We've heard about legacy this morning, and I want to talk about the history of legacy giving here at FRS. First, I want to thank trustees Art Henshaw, Will Rogers, and Don Askey, who did the hard work of researching and organizing all the information about our legacy gifts. What they found is that there were a lot of gifts made over the almost 300 years since our church was founded in 1726. Some were small gifts, such as $250 in 1737, which was given by Captain Cornish. Some were much larger, such as a $10,000 gift from Winthrop Coffin in the 1850s. More recently, in 2004, FRS received a large bequest from Mariah Stern, which some of you may remember. Some folks have chosen to make their gifts anonymously. Some chose to ask the church to use their gift in a particular way. Some make gifts with no restrictions whatsoever. What makes these gifts so important is their permanent nature. The real power of a legacy gift, large or small, is that it can grow over a long, long time. And in time, all legacy gifts become part of the source of a permanent income stream for the church. And that income can be used for the annual programs we count on, for the maintenance of our beautiful buildings, or to allow the church to assist those in need in our community and beyond our community, or to help the generations of FRS folks that will come after us to fulfill the mission of the church. I did a little calculation of what a $1737 might grow to become over 285 years. I assumed a pretty modest 3% annual compounding rate. The answer is $4,556. That's the power of a legacy gift. It shows that all legacy gifts matter and are greatly appreciated. So, Annie?
Thanks, Lark. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, we are now of a certain age where looking to our legacy after we pass on comes to mind. We all leave our marks after we pass in many ways, but for us, the idea of supporting this church into the future makes a lot of sense. We are so grateful for receiving much from our being a part of this community for almost 35 years. Knowing so many of you, working with you to further the church's mission, learning together, being together in joyful times and sad times. Our connections here have enriched our lives immeasurably. To put it simply, we believe what the church does is important and meaningful and worth sustaining for future generations. We have planned a legacy gift in an effort to do just that. This sort of gifting can be very flexible so that your values are foremost in mind, and it does not need to be complex or highly complicated. Once more, as Lark mentioned, a gift of any size can be powerful. If you have made plans for legacy giving, thank you on behalf of this church and its future generations. If you are curious and want to know more, please be in touch with Reverend Rebecca, Vern, Lark, or me. We'd be happy to discuss it with you. Of course, after you and while you consult with your own personal trusted advisors. Also, please watch for stewardship pages and legacy pages on the website, which are available to you now and will be more prominent as the weeks go by. We hope you'll join us and consider supporting FRS in this way for the benefit of generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, choir. Beautiful. And thank you, Joanna and Sue and Lark and Annie. This has been such a special month as we've celebrated our giving month and annual giving, because it's become a tradition that we hear from many of you. I do hope you'll come again next week for our final week, and we'll be hearing from Ray Wilson and from Paula Esty, and I'll be sharing my journey of faith entitled To the Point. Our reading this morning is a poem written by our own John Mercer, entitled Preparing for a Hike. I somehow came upon this poem when I was actually in search. Little serendipitous there. And I was just smitten with it. And I've been waiting, and this is the right week. So, preparing for a hike. Consider the season. In the spring, pack sandals for water crossings. In the fall, a space blanket for the unplanned night out. Consider the route. Imagine your way through the good route and also the other route, the less preferred, the one you'll need when the first proves impassable. Consider what to carry in your head. Don't listen to sappy music before setting off. The sappier the music, the more you will resent your own brain. Don't worry about what to do with your head. Your head won't work after some hours on the trail. Consider what you'll pass through. Know your trees, your ferns, your mushrooms. Know your wildflowers, both the garish and the shy. Know the birds by their calls, and distinguish the chickadee from the white-throat sparrow. Mind the ovenbird. Take joy in the winter wren, your most tireless companion. And be ready with the first step to give up control and let the journey unfold on its own, as it most certainly will. Let its accidents become its opportunities. Let its challenges become triumphs. Let it enter your heart and inhabit you. Let it sanctify you. Let you and the journey and nature be one, as you most certainly are. And I would say amen. I chose that reading for today because of so much of what it says. And of course, imagine our lives as that journey. This church was incorporated with the name, the First Religious Society, in 1794. And you may have heard earlier that it actually was incorporated in 1725. So what happened between 1725 and 1794 when it became the First Religious Society? Well, in its history, it had been the third parish of Newbury, founded in 1725, the first parish of Newburyport from 1765 until 1794, and then, of course, the First Religious Society, including until this day. It happened in 1794. Just put yourself there for a moment. This was only 7 years after James Madison wrote what we now know as the U.S. Constitution. Indeed, the history of this congregation is steeped in meaning and legacy. I have had the immense pleasure of immersing myself in our earliest church history over the last 2 weeks by reading Minnie Atkinson's volume entitled The First Religious Society in Newburyport, which, by the way, was awarded the best parish history by the Unitarian Historical Society in 1932. Oh, I have learned such interesting facts and revealing some of them. For example, we did have an associate minister, meaning a second minister, at one time. The Reverend John Andrews, who was hired when the esteemed Reverend Thomas Carey fell ill into his ministry in 1788. And it's just so like this congregation. The story is beautiful. So the minister they loved, 20 years into his ministry, became quite ill, invalid, able to make appearances in the pulpit sometimes. We didn't let him go. Negotiate a resignation. Well, we just hire a second minister so that both of them can hold that role. I also learned that the first two ministers of this church, Reverends John Lowell and Thomas Carey, both died at the age of 64. Okay, so I thought, well, that's gotten broken. We're not going to continue that legacy. However, I found that interesting, and in that time, both of them, this came after long tenures of ministry. There is also a legacy of ministers starting their first ministry here, and for many of them, their only settled ministry here. I also learned of the legacy of prominence of our beloved parish and how it has held this in the city since its inception nearly 300 years ago. A legacy, as you've heard this morning, that we have the honor and privilege of upholding and forming today and in the years to come. About a quarter of the way through this book, because it's not that long, I realized I was slowing down in my reading, savoring every word, hungry for more information. And I wondered, did the earliest members of our congregation know they were leaving a legacy as they voted to build a new meeting house erected in 1801, or to give parishioners the right in 1818 to install, now in this building, stoves for heat at their own expense, or lower the pulpit? Yes, this pulpit is lowered from where it originally had been, about a foot lower. That happened somewhere in Reverend Fox's tenure, probably in the 1830s or early 1840s. Could they have imagined us reading their history today and what we might look like? Author and writer Pat Schneider, who had not been a member of this congregation, but who I'd like to invite into this at this point, this beloved woman from Amherst, Massachusetts, a writer and a wonderful human being, supported all kinds of writers, including women in prison. And she offers this meditation that I'd like to invite you into. She says, imagine yourself going back to the house where your great-great-grandmother or grandfather lived. It's okay if you don't know their names or anything about them. They were there. It may very well have been, by the way, in the late 1700s, around the time that this sanctuary was under consideration of being built. And she says, arriving at this house, you find only a stone foundation. You move the stone, and you find only a small sheath of paper. And on these pages, your great-great-grandmother has written in tiny letters. It isn't fancy writing. She's writing what your great-great-grandfather said when he came in to tell her that the potatoes had all rotted. She's writing about the baby that just died. Wouldn't that be a treasure? Then so will your life be a treasure if you tell the truth about your life. All of us, every person, has that treasure. Your life, no matter who you are, has significance. The end of her words. Like our forebearers, we are creating our part of the legacy of the first religious society and our own lives. The priorities we establish and the choices we make as a congregation are guided by the values, mission, and ends that we approved in the fall of 2020. And it's inspiring to see how far we've come on those goals. The power of articulating explicitly what the values are, what the mission is, what the goals are, not only as a congregation, but in our own lives, is amazing. So we've prepared an update on that so you can see that progress. And on your way out in a few minutes this morning, you'll be given a copy of that report, which I hope you will take and read, and we can have conversations. We all leave a legacy in many areas of our lives, regardless of whether we leave financial legacies. Our life is our legacy, and it matters. We cannot have no imprint on the universal web of existence, even if you try to hide. The question for all of us then is, what kind of an imprint do we choose to leave? We don't know how our words and actions influence others, but they do. Though we may not be able to entirely control the legacy that lives on after we die, there is much we can control. Think about this. We can control our actions and our words, how we invest our gifts of talent, time, treasures. We can control how we treat other people. Many of us are blessed with some degree of control over how we spend our time, where to focus our attention. In more tender of topics, we also get to choose if, who, and how we forgive. We get to ask that our wishes are granted for a celebration of our life. We get to decide who enters that most sacred of circles called our inner heart. It all comes down to intentions, I believe. Setting intentions and then focusing on what we can control and making a life of meaning that is consistent with our heart's song and our values. It's something we do many times over the course of our lives. And when lived this way, our life is akin to taking a hike. And again, drawing on John Mercer's words, thinking of your life and your legacy, consider the season. What season of life are you in? Consider the route. Consider what to carry in your head. Consider what you'll pass through. And be ready with the first step to give up control and let the journey unfold on its own, as it most certainly will. I had hoped we'd have time to sit in meditation, and we really don't, but I want to invite you to take the last questions I'm going to ask and hold them in your mind and heart today. Maybe find 3 minutes of quiet. What are the themes of your legacy? What do you want people to recall when they remember you? What traits or actions or characteristics will make up your legacy? Amen, and blessed be. I invite us to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 114, Forward Through the Ages. Please join your voices now in our unison benediction. The words are in the order of service. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. My friends, as we gather in gratitude for being together, so we depart better for having spent this time as one. So whatever may pass through the days ahead until we return, know you go as part of us. Know you are never alone. Look for the blades of green grass. Forgive yourself. Forgive others. Consider the legacy of each day. Go in peace, my friends. Return again in great joy. Amen and blessed be.